community.
We are all in this together. The education of young people is a community effort.
The Charlottesville community is coming to grips with a scathing article about systemic racism and unequal education.
Cops and the Klan go hand in hand. This is going to
Still, the school board continued its meeting. Students of Albemarle County Public Schools got the chance to speak to school board members regarding the anti-racism policy.
We honor this privilege. An anti-racism policy is a much-needed necessity for the County of Albemarle.
Tonight, there is much controversy surrounding whether or not it was the right move to change a high school name that's been around for more than a century. Now, last night, Staunton School Board voted 4-2 to rename Robert E. Lee High School. It's been up for debate for over a year now.
It uncovers history that lots of times might be uncomfortable for us to uncover.
But first tonight, Albemarle County Public School students are taking a tough look at history as the division looks to change the way it's taught.
The Staunton area community is sounding off when it comes to diversity and inclusiveness within the city's school system. But the biggest topic was the debate over the high school's name. NBC29's Tara Todd was at the first of 2 listening sessions.
Our current name harms us all. It projects the wrong idea about our city and how we treat people of color.
Robert E. Lee High School. Before 1914, it was Staunton High School.
Staunton High School was renamed in his honor at the height of legalized discrimination. His name was a symbol of white supremacy, so it is not hard to understand why people of color are deeply offended.
Tuesday, dozens debated the school name inside the gym at Gypsy Hill Park during a listening session about diversity and inclusivity.
I'm 1,000% against the name change, but for me, it has nothing to do with politics, it has nothing to do with history, and it has nothing to do with racism.
Many, shown by the signs around town and the thousands of online petition signatures, are in favor of keeping the Lee moniker. Some say money for a name change could be better spent elsewhere.
Spending $1 million to change the name while our children are going without is simply irresponsible. Until such time as my faith in Staunton City Schools is restored to provide my children with all the tools they need for a quality education, I cannot support restoring the name.
Some say put it on the ballot.
You want to settle it in an equitable way, there needs to be a referendum where the sole issue is, do you support spending the money, changing the name, or don't you? That needs to be done.
Or drop Robert E. and just go with Lee.
To me, Lee means learning, education, and excellence. I have always heard students and individuals call it Lee High. Very seldom do I ever hear Robert E. Lee.
Current students and recent graduates also weighed in.
Driving into a parking lot that says Robert E. Lee High School on it makes students, whether or not they're black or they're white, feel very uncomfortable.
I am proud to go there, and I will be proud to graduate as a fighting Leeman.
I think this means perspective and insight into our community, into some of the issues we're facing now.
Charlottesville school administrators and teachers are getting a better handle on the city's history. There's no question the city of Charlottesville is grappling with issues surrounding race and the impacts its history has had on our current policies.
Now, educators are getting some schooling on the topic before classes kick off next week.
We're here in our Court Square Park, which was one of the sites for roughly 140 people from Charlottesville High School in central office. The principal tells us that he hopes this perspective will give some insight into some of the issues we're dealing with.
I just think, when we teach students in the classroom, sometimes the history still plays a big part in their lives now, and in equity issues within our cities.
Dozens of teachers, administrators, and school staff are coming to grips with Charlottesville's deep racial and ethnic history.
I think for anybody, especially if you interact with the community in any capacity, you should understand what the history is in the place where you live and work.
Staff members walked through Court Square to learn about the slave auction block and the Confederate statues that stand downtown.
I think it's important to realize the historical events that have taken place that are affecting our current climate and our current issues we're facing facing as a city.
With all the political turmoil and everything that's happened since I've moved here, and I know it's affected the kids in our school a lot, getting a little more background so I can kind of incorporate it into more culturally responsive teaching.
They also visited the Rotunda on UVA grounds to hear about the enslaved people who helped build the university and the former community of Vinegar Hill, a black neighborhood that was demolished.
I think it would help to be conscious of things that are going on in the community. Just being a part of the community can help the students relate to you more and make them feel safer in the school context.
I hope they understand a little bit more about themselves, because that's also the other thing. And not only do you want to understand the history and how it impacts the families and the students that you work with, you want to also understand how it impacts you.
Charlottesville High School principal says that this is just the beginning and is part of an ongoing series that will explore racial equity in history.
The school board is set to vote on what some people consider a new policy that works to ensure a fair and equal dress code for all students. But members of the Hate-Free Schools Coalition of Albemarle County say the only policy should be one that specifically bans Confederate and racist imagery.
Thursday's Albemarle County School Board meeting did not go as planned. The board was set to vote on changing the wording of its dress code policy. Time was set aside in the beginning for public comment.
On July 12th, Graham Page asked that the community members, us.
That didn't happen. Board members took a 10-minute recess following the first speaker, saying that members of the audience were not allowed to make any noise.
No clapping, booing, or any other form of noise making occurs. We would like your assistance to continue with our meeting tonight. So I'd like to call the next speaker, and I would ask everyone to remain silent. If you support a particular view, please stand for it.
That goes
We
against
will
the
see you.
policy.
I'm sorry, there is no
There are
debate.
folks who can't stand.
School board meetings are meetings that are held in public. They are not public meetings. There's a difference. We're here to govern the school division. We want to hear input from the public. And then we think it's important to hear input from the public. But this is not a public meeting.
After disruptions continued, board members quickly ended the meeting.
Shame! 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 Shame!
We
are here for a meeting.
Members of the audience gathered outside the Albemarle County office building and went on with the planned speaker list.
It wasn't our intention to shut the meeting down. I'm surprised that they made the choice knowing why we're here and what we want to talk about. It's very clear to me that their choice was to shut it down to preserve their own comfort.
Members of the Hate-Free School Coalition in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, even came to speak to the school board.
With the unfortunate incident, the tragedy that happened in Charlottesville, our board voted to immediately adopt a change in our policy so that you cannot wear that offensive attire.
Can we do better? I'm sure we can. But I don't believe that focusing 100% of our energies on symbolism on clothing is the best we can do.
Shame! 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 Shame!
Albemarle County Public Schools dress code debate prompted last night's school board meeting to come to a quick end.
What we saw last night was a pressure test. It was a true pressure test against the white supremacist ideals that are being upheld by the school board.
Tonight, the Albemarle County School Board will hold a special meeting to discuss its dress code policy following an abrupt ending to the last meeting.
Cops and the Klan go hand in hand. This is our space. This is my land.
Still, the school board continued its meeting. Students of Albemarle County Public Schools got the chance to speak to school board members regarding the anti-racism policy.
We honor this privilege. An anti-racism policy is a much-needed necessity for the County of Albemarle, a policy that will enumerate the concerns of the masses.
6 people are facing charges after a school board meeting in Albemarle County grew extremely rowdy. Members wanted to discuss the dress code policy, which has become controversial in the past few weeks. Protesters showed up saying they want to make sure schools ban clothing that shows any kind of Confederate imagery. Several spoke out of turn, and when police asked them to leave, they refused. Officers arrested 6 people for trespassing, and some are also charged with obstruction of justice. In the end, board members tabled the issue yet again.
The Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities has been looking at diversity and inclusion in Staunton City Schools. New tonight, the long-awaited results are in.
While some of our work has been focused on the name of the high school, our charge has been much broader than that.
To share the results of a 5-month study with a lot of public input on diversity and inclusion in Staunton City Schools. They noticed several emerging themes: concerns about instability in leadership at Bessie Weller, the achievement gap, and the idea of reformatting elementary school zones to reduce academic and social divisions.
The issue that garnered the most interest and energy throughout our time with Staunton City Schools was around the name of Robert E. Lee High School.
Ballard shared reasons provided by the community to keep the name.
One thing that clearly emerged consistently was there was some really proud nostalgia around Robert E. Lee.
And Zor shared reasons to change the name.
A significant number of participants in the process shared their personal view that the name is offensive and does not create an environment that is welcoming.
Albemarle County Superintendent Matt Haas announced today that the county will be joining forces with the city to combat racism in the school system. Both school boards will work together to develop policies and practices. This comes after protesters and community members took concerns to both boards about the opportunity gap for minority students as well as racist symbols in schools.
Members of both school boards asked for funding to get mental health counselors in their schools today. Charlottesville representatives say safety and positive mental health also means banning hate symbols.
I think if folks in the local division want to try to deal with this hate speech issue, which is really important, they'll figure out a way to do it locally.
Charlottesville City School Superintendent is not denying the facts. The school system has a significant achievement gap between white and black students.
The nonprofit newsroom ProPublica teamed up with the New York Times to dig into the numbers and impacts of that gap. And while the article is putting the issue front and center, people in Charlottesville say this is something they've been working to fight for a while now. NBC29's Carly Kempler has our top story. She is live in Charlottesville. Good evening, Carly.
Good evening, Steve and Casey. Now, schools like Clark Elementary are cited as having some of these racial inequities, but after speaking with some parents and school officials, they say that this cannot be blamed on a single institution or one single factor. Instead, they say it goes deeper than just the school system.
It's so much that you can pinpoint out, and they'll make every excuse to say that that's not true, but I mean, numbers really don't lie.
The gap between black and white students in Charlottesville's public schools is concerning.
What's most important to us is our student achievement, and our black students are not achieving where we want them to be.
Stats from the state's Department of Education show half of all black students in the city are unable to read on grade level, compared to just over 10% of white students. And while this ProPublica article paints a bleak picture, the superintendent says the gap is not being ignored.
They are making gains, and they are making progress. There's some work that we have to do. But we've achieved quite a bit. Our teachers have worked really hard.
Others disagree.
Teachers are literally part of the problem. They're more of the problem than people like the superintendent, because the teachers have the one-on-one.
Some Charlottesville parents say this achievement gap stems from multiple issues.
We have to, really pay attention to as parents. We really need to focus on making sure that our children are getting what they need when they need it.
Elementary schools are pretty segregated to 3 black and 3 more white. And the zoning that's been used to implement that.
The city's history of segregation and legacy of Jim Crow may also be factors.
When that legacy persists, you're going to get disparities not only in the classroom, but in the neighborhood. There's an opportunity gap in these neighborhoods, not just an achievement gap in the classroom.
Now City Hall and the schools are trying to figure out how to do more together.
It's a citywide issue. It's going to take citywide investment across multiple generations in our poorest neighborhoods.
The education of a child is shared by the entire community. Schools play a big part in that. So we're going to move forward to pull our community together to determine where do we go from here. Let's hear voices.
Albemarle County teachers are currently reviewing the social studies curriculum to more honestly and fully address the legacies of racism, slavery, and inequity.
And that work involves getting students away from textbooks and out of the classroom to experience history firsthand. Today that included a conversation with a reformed white nationalist. That's where NBC29's Lowell Rose picks up our top story.
Hey there, Stephen Casey. Today, the superintendent and teachers and students, they visited the Holocaust Museum in Richmond. This project is all about reframing the narrative by digging deeper into the past and how it's still impacting our present.
These are all people that worked against the Nazis, that helped Jewish people.
Forget the classroom. Teachers are taking new steps to make history more interactive and real for students.
We really want to switch up what we're doing in our classrooms and make sure that kids are able to make those connection points between the history that they see happening in our own town in Charlottesville a year ago.
Teachers are using the Holocaust Museum and lessons from a former white nationalist to open their eyes.
I want to make sure that I share my story, but also have them have the experience of being at the Holocaust Museum to really instill the sense of urgency about what's happening in the world today to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Christian Picciolini is a former white nationalist whose mission now is making sure people stay away from the radical views and behaviors he once had.
I hope that I was just able to give a little bit of insight into how I was drawn into the white supremacist movement 30 years ago, and also how I got out, because so many of those same things are happening today.
As we all know, by the time the story hits the ProPublica or the New York Times, the damage to our children has already been done.
The Charlottesville School Board is still addressing concerns about the opportunity gap following a ProPublica article published last month showing the division has one of the largest opportunity gaps in the country.
We want to, increase the diversity of our teaching pool. We want to, of course, reduce that opportunity gap that we have talked about so much, but it won't be done overnight.
The school division held a community gathering last week to bring up concerns from the article, but some say more needs to be done.
While the African American community in Charlottesville and Albemarle County at large may no longer be separate, we are most definitely not equal.
School board members say they want people in the community to feel like they are being heard.
Make sure that our students understand that when they bring about change or they bring suggestions, that we as adults do the best that we can do to make those changes.
One of those changes being a resolution passed by the board Thursday night banning Confederate imagery from the division's dress code.
We are grateful that you are embracing this resolution and banning hate imagery and specifically the Confederate flag in your schools. The resolution is strongly worded and it is powerful.
Board members say they want to see the school division address issues raised by the community, but changes could take some time.
I would rather see us make incremental growth than to make these great strides and then next week we're back on the ground.
Staunton is divided over a new name for Robert E. Lee High School. School board members have thousands of submissions to consider and less than 2 weeks to come up with an answer. NBC29's Megan Moriarty attended a work session this morning and joins us live in our newsroom. Good evening, Megan.
Hi, Steve. The city sorted through more than 4,000 submissions. Queen City and Staunton High School had the most votes, but some people aren't thrilled about either option. After a divided vote back in October,
as a board, we need to come out of this one. This needs to be a 6-0 vote.
Staunton City School Board has a decision to make on the new name for Robert E. Lee High School. With more than 4,000 submissions from community members, 2 names stand out.
With Staunton High School and also Queen City, it was 2 voices in there. One was the adults, but also one was the students.
Some board members have concerns.
I like the recommendation of making it Staunton United instead of just Staunton High School, because one of the concerns people had with the name Staunton was that we're going back to the past, and we're going back to a time when the schools were still segregated.
Members also aren't on board for Queen City.
I have serious concern about the both the turning of that into negativity at sporting events, and also those within our schools who are of different sexualities being targeted.
Regardless of the name, all members agree a decision needs to be made soon.
We need to move on. We need to get back to our jobs to support the division, staff, Dr. Smith, and we got some good things going on, but we need to decide this and move on.
Albemarle County School Board is once again discussing ways to address racism in the school division. Tonight, the board looked at an anti-racism policy draft created by students, while also discussing how it plans to take steps to enforce the proposed policy in the county. This comes after the school division announced it would work together with Charlottesville schools to address anti-racism policies in both systems. Charlottesville City Schools passed a resolution last week banning Confederate imagery from its schools. Albemarle Superintendent Matt Haas says the divisions want the same outcomes, but won't necessarily work at the same pace.
They moved at a different pace than perhaps our board did. Our board is moving. They decided to prioritize having an anti-racism policy to begin with.
Haas says once the board further discusses the anti-racism policy at its meeting in December, it will then start planning ways to address the school division's dress code policy.
In addition to a new name, Robert E. Lee High School is getting a makeover. Today I sat down with Staunton City Schools superintendent and a board member to talk about all these big changes. After a 6-0 vote, the Staunton City School Board is putting a year-long discussion and divide to rest. Robert E. Lee will soon be Staunton High.
I felt that we really needed a clean slate.
The new name means a lot of changes at a price. Just new uniforms could cost thousands.
$200,000 in the grand scheme of things of what our full budget for the school system is a tiny, tiny portion, and it's necessary. We're ready to rebrand the high school and move forward under our new moniker.
Then factor in a new mascot, signage, and possibly school colors.
We also need band uniforms that are not tied to the new school construction. They're 12, 13 years old, so we needed them anyways. So that's probably about another $50,000.
The outdated high school is also about to get a $40 million facelift.
It's the same bones, but inside of it, it's going to look a lot different.
The separate renovation project will allow the school to accommodate an additional 130 students thanks to a new wing.
That's where these wide corridors will be, and that's where these STEM spaces, the media center, all the updated classroom spaces that are the appropriate size for high school students, those will all be in the new classroom wing.
Paul Cale Jr. says his work is solely to make sure the whole truth about his father is told to everyone. He says his dad was working to strike a balance during desegregation for everyone involved.
I'll do anything I can if for him. He was a great dad, and I think he was a great educator.
Paul Cale Jr. says his father and former Albemarle County Schools Superintendent Paul Cale is not a racist man, as some may believe.
When it came to the school division's attention that Paul Cale had made a comment in a national magazine that African American teachers were inferior to white teachers, it prompted us not just to look at Cale, but to really think about all of the schools in the school division.
Earlier this year, the school board learned about the comments made in 1956 amidst desegregation of county schools, prompting the school system to look into its school naming and renaming process.
What we want to do is make sure that all of our schools' names reflect the values of the school division. That's really important to us.
Cale Jr. says the article in question paraphrased his father, and that his words and ideas have been taken out of context because teachers of different races didn't have the same training.
Say that described my father. I could not let that happen.
Racial disparity is a concern inside Charlottesville and Albemarle County Schools. A fellowship program has set its sight on fixing the issue. But as we end the year, the African American Teaching Fellows program needs your help to keep the work going. NBC29's Henry Graff joins us in studio tonight with details. Good evening, Henry.
Hey, Steve. Good evening. The whole idea behind African American Teaching Fellows is to produce leaders from all walks of life. We caught up with a teacher who's been in this program and some students to see if they think it's working.
So Jacob, now that I've multiplied all my terms, what do I get from my equation?
Deandra McDonald spends her days in the classroom using equations to teach math. But a Monticello High School teacher has a hard time balancing one equation in particular.
Especially as black educators in Albemarle County, there are not too many of us.
In Charlottesville and Albemarle, 1 out of every 10 teachers is African American. Or look at it this way. For every 122 students, there's only one teacher of color.
To not even be able to pick out someone who might at least visually be able to give you some comfort is sad.
The lack of diversity leading the classroom is something African American Teaching Fellows is changing. AATF is a program that recruits and supports black teachers in the city and county. Nick Donald entered the program in 2015.
Our children are at stake. In today's America in particular, exposure is key.
For Daisha Kinlaw, that exposure in the classroom is inspiring her to dream big. The 11th grader wants to be a marine biologist.
I feel like she has helped me a lot as an individual because I think from her past experience helping other African American students and pushing them to be great.
AATF invests $10,000 a year in each fellow. That money goes toward financial, professional, and social support.
You want like a mother in the class or a father in the class. You want to talk to somebody you know you can talk to about like anything.
The turtle is a primary consumer because it eats the kelp.
A teacher, a friend, a mentor.
So we can get somewhere in life.
But that's only if donations keep flowing in to keep the progress moving.
This fellowship is in Charlottesville, in Albemarle, trying to keep as many educators of color here, where there isn't a huge network.
The Fellows Program hosts an annual dinner. The John E. Baker Legacy Dinner will be held for the 9th time coming up in 2019. Last year's event was sold out and there was a wait list. For details on how you can support AATF, head over to our website, NBC29.com.
Look, we're leaving, okay? Just leave us alone, maybe?
Monticello senior student and new playwright Kayla Scott taps into her own experiences.
No, it shouldn't have taken you all so long to leave. This is the problem with you people. You don't know how to behave in public.
To demonstrate racism and gentrification in society.
Because I have had personal experience of racial profiling, whether it's been going into stores and feeling uncomfortable when eyes are looked at me, or going into places that are like predominantly white and then feeling like an outcast when people do look at you.
You don't belong here? Are you serious right now?
So there are some aspects of Charlottesville that are being gentrified, where I know where some black families are being taken out of their homes or neighborhood that they grew up in for many generations.
Scott started writing the play #WhileBlack this summer amidst talks of the anniversary of August 12, 2017 in Charlottesville.
It gets to the point where it's too frustrating and then you just want to like break down. But my way of breaking down is like writing this play and getting my message across.
On top of being a playwright, Scott holds down 3 jobs, has an internship at the UVA Medical Center, and tutors other students.
I really wasn't expecting Kayla to write a play because she's an HMSA student and she wants to be a doctor, and I really didn't know that she was a playwright. And then all of a sudden she came up with this.
Drama teacher Madeline Michaels says Scott and her classmates give her hope for the future.
Whenever I'm feeling really down about the state of the world, I come into work and these teenagers, they're the next generation and they are going to lead us into a better place.
Scott is thrilled to hopefully present her play on a national stage. She's focused on educating as many people as she can.
I can't blame people if they don't know. So that's why I'm writing this and I'm speaking to people so we educate them on this so that they're able to take this, process it, and educate more people.
In Albemarle County, Caroline Colburn, NBC29 News.